Jordan shouldn't exist, not as we know it, not as a stable kingdom in a region that treats stability like a temporary rumour. And yet, there it is. A country drawn by colonial pens, challenged by wars it didn't start, strained by refugees it didn't create, and still standing. At the centre, a family with an ancient claim and a modern job description. Survive, adapt, and keep the state intact. They are the Hashemites. Rulers of Jordan since 1921, once guardians of Islam's holiest cities, now guardians of something else entirely. A nation built in the 20th century, forced to act like it's been here forever. This is the architecture of a modern monarchy, its legitimacy, its contradictions, and the pressures that keep it moving. The Hashemites are not just a royal family. They are a claim, carefully carried, constantly tested. They trace their lineage to Banu Hashim, the Prophet Muhammad's clan, an identity that carries a moral weight across the Islamic world. In monarchies, legitimacy comes from the sword or the ballot. In Jordan, legitimacy also comes from lineage, and from the story the state tells about why this family should hold the center. For centuries, the Hashemites were sharifs of Mecca, local rulers of the Hijaz, guardians tied to Islam's holy cities. Their authority wasn't just political, it was symbolic, embedded in the geography of faith. But the 20th century didn't reward symbolism unless it could survive geopolitics. In 1916, one man sits at the center of this story: Sharif Hussein bin Ali. And he had 3 sons who would carry the Hashemite name into new states: Faisal, Abdullah, and Ali. That same year, Hussein launched the Great Arab Revolt against Ottoman rule, encouraged by British promises and driven by a vision of Arab independence. The revolt wasn't just a battlefield story, it was a negotiation in motion. Hussein's camp believed independence was on the table. Britain wanted the Ottoman collapse. Each side heard what it needed to hear. And in the background, quiet, clinical, Europe was already drafting the afterlife of the Ottoman map. While Arab fighters were bleeding for a future, the future was being partitioned on paper. The revolt helped break an empire, but the promised unified Arab state did not arrive as imagined. Instead came mandates, borders, and new states designed for manageability, not identity. Hashemite sons became kings in new places, briefly in Syria, then more durably in Iraq and Transjordan, like a dynasty redistributed by history. What the family lost in Mecca, it tried to rediscover in statecraft. But the Hijaz, its original base, was about to become a battlefield. A new power was rising out of the desert. Abdulaziz ibn Saud and the Naiji forces that would become the core of Saudi Arabia. This wasn't a movement trying to negotiate history. It was trying to take it. In 1924, Sharif Hussein tried to strengthen his position, making grander claims, including declaring himself caliph. But legitimacy on paper doesn't stop an army in motion, and it can alienate rivals who see it as provocation. In September 1924, Naji forces captured Taif, a key gateway into the Hijaz. Panic spread through Mecca's political class. Retreat was urged. The situation was collapsing fast. And Hussein did something that tells you he understood the game had turned. He stepped aside. In early October 1924, Hussein ibn Ali abdicated his throne in favor of his son, Ali bin Hussein, a last attempt to preserve the dynasty's position as the ground moved under them. But abdication wasn't a reset button. It was a retreat under fire. On December the 5th, 1924, Mecca fell. The holy city, the center of pilgrimage, changed hands, and with it, the Hashemites lost the crown jewel of their historical legitimacy. By January 1926, Jeddah was the last major holdout. When it surrendered, Saudi forces entered on January the 8th, and the war was, for all practical purposes, finished. That same day, leaders from Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah proclaimed Saudi ibn Saud king of the Hijaz. The message was unmistakable. The Hashemites had lost the land that once defined them. And that's the turning point. A dynasty built around holy cities suddenly had to live without them. So the question became simple and brutal: disappear or reinvent? The reinvention would happen somewhere unexpected, east of the Jordan River, in a new territory Britain was helping shape. Transjordan wasn't old, but in politics, new can be a weapon, because it means the story isn't finished yet. In 1921, Britain supported Abdullah bin Hussein, the man who will be later known in history as King Abdullah I of Jordan, son of Sharif Hussein, as leader of Transjordan. This wasn't the Hashemites getting Mecca back. It was something colder and more modern. Build a state where there hadn't been one in the modern sense. And here's the key point, simple but crucial. Jordan wasn't born as an ancient nation that slowly evolved into a modern country. Jordan was born modern. Its borders were shaped by Mandate-era decisions, by colonial politics, then filled in with real people, real loyalties, and real pressure.
Jordania no nace como una nación antigua, nace como un estado moderno. En el año 1921, los británicos apoyan al rey Abdullah para que reine dentro de Jordania. La misión de Abdullah es clave: modernizar el estado, hacerlo estable, y lo consigue con metas muy básicas: una buena administración, unas buenas alianzas, tanto internas con las tribus que tiene el país, como externas con los países colindantes, con seguridad y con un sistema educativo eficiente.
Emir Abdullah's mission wasn't just to govern. It was to make this place feel like a country, to link tribes, towns, and institutions into a system that actually worked. For years, this was state building in real time, security, administration alliances day after day, problem after problem. Because when a country begins as lines on a map, legitimacy isn't inherited, it's built. And the Hashemites understood something early. Survival in this region doesn't come from being loved. It becomes from being functional. Then, in 1946, Transjordan became independent, the Hashemites' Kingdom of Jordan. And Emir Abdullah became what the world would now call him, King Abdullah I of Jordan. But independence didn't mean safety. It meant Jordan had to survive on its own, right next to the most explosive fault line in the region. And King Abdullah I was building his kingdom with one eye on Oman and the other on Jerusalem. For Jordan, Jerusalem wasn't just nearby. It carried religious meaning, political weight, and enormous risk. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jordan's role grew fast. Jordan took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Then, in 1950, Jordan annexed the West Bank. That changed everything, because it tied Jordan directly to the Palestinian question, a conflict that was already pulling the whole region apart. For some people, King Abdullah I looked like a protector. For others, he looked like a threat. And when a leader becomes both, danger follows. On July 20th, 1951, King Abdullah I went to Jerusalem. And at Al-Aqsa Mosque, he was assassinated. He wasn't killed in Amman, where the state could protect him. He was killed in Jerusalem, on the region's fault line. And suddenly, Jordan faced a terrifying test. Could a young country survive the loss of its founder? After Abdullah I's death, Talal bin Abdullah al-Hashimi became King Talal in 1951. Jordan needed continuity fast. The kingdom was still young, still exposed, and still tied to Jerusalem and the Palestinian question in ways that could ignite overnight. Hussein was born in Amman, the eldest child of King Talal. He started school in Amman and continued his education abroad. But in 1951, Talal took the throne. Hussein's life stopped being education. It became preparation. King Talal named him heir apparent, and suddenly the monarchy had a future on paper. Then Jordan's stability was tested again. In 1952, Parliament forced King Talal to abdicate due to illness. A regency council was appointed to rule until Hussein came of age. So the kingdom entered a tense waiting period, governed by committee, watched by rivals, and held together by the idea of a teenage heir who wasn't fully in charge yet. Then, just at 17, Hussein was enthroned. He would spend the rest of his life mastering one skill above all others: survival.
I believe that the people of Jordan, both in the occupied territory and here, have exercised their right to resist aggression and to resist occupation, and continue to do so so long as there is occupation.
From the start, Hussein had to hold together three forces that don't always pull in the same direction. First, the tribes, especially the East Bank base, had anchored the monarchy since Transjordan. Second, the army, the hard spine of the state. And third, external allies, because Jordan's geography makes it impossible to survive on pride alone. The 1950s and the 1960s were dangerous years for the monarchs. Arab nationalism was rising, military coups were spreading, and leaders like Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser were becoming symbols bigger than borders. Jordan wasn't just competing with neighbors, it was competing with ideas.
En la década de los 50 y de los 60, la región se encuentra llena de golpes de Estado, guerras civiles y problemas en todos los países. Esto es un reto gigante para Jordania y para Hussein, su nuevo líder. Él asciende al poder siendo muy joven y en un periodo muy difícil. Para afrontar los problemas, Hussein tomó 3 puntos clave. El primero, alianzas externas. Se logró aliar con varios países exteriores que ayudaron a Jordania. Lo segundo, alianzas internas. Logró aliarse con diferentes tribus que había en el país. Y lo tercero, se alió con el ejército, lo que le hizo conseguir más fuerza y más poder dentro del país.
One of Hussein's boldest early moves came in 1956, when he dismissed Glub Pashu, the British commander who had led Jordan's Arab Legion for years. For Jordanians, it was more than a personnel change. It was a signal. This king would not look like a British project. That decision brought Hussein credibility at home. But it also raised the stakes. Once you declare independence in public, you have to defend it in private. Then came the internal shocks, political unrest, plots, pressure from rival states. In 1958, Jordan watched a monarchy fall next door when Iraq's royal family was overthrown. That wasn't just news. That was a warning, delivered in real time. Hussein tightened the system, reinforcing loyalty, keeping the army close, managing tribes carefully, and staying flexible with allies. Britain at first, then increasingly the United States, while still trying to remain acceptable in the Arab world. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Jordan lost the West Bank and East Jerusalem to Israel. That loss hit Jordan in two ways at once. It was a political blow, and it triggered more displacement and anger. As the pressure grew, Palestinian armed groups, often called the Fedayeen, became stronger inside Jordan. They used Jordan as a base to launch attacks across the border, and many Palestinians saw them as the face of resistance when diplomacy felt useless. But for the Jordanian state, this created a dangerous problem. Jordan already had an army and police. Now there were armed groups operating openly, sometimes setting up their own checkpoints, carrying weapons in public and acting like they answered to no one in Amman. By the late 1960s, clashes between the Jordanian secret forces and Palestinian factions were happening more often. Every confrontation raised the same fear. Jordan was sliding toward a situation with two competing powers in one country. And Hussein was trapped. If he moved too hard against the Fedayeen, he risked looking like he was attacking Palestinians, something that could ignite the streets and damage Jordan's standing in the Arab world. If he did nothing, the Jordanian state itself could weaken from the inside. Then the crisis went international, through the skies. Jordan could no longer manage it quietly. For Hussein, survival now only had two paths: confrontation or collapse. By 1970, Jordan wasn't facing a normal political crisis. It was facing a basic survival question: who controls the country, the state, or an armed movement inside it? After 1967, Palestinian Fedayeen groups had grown stronger inside Jordan. Many Palestinians saw them as the resistance, but for the Jordanian state, their growing independence, public weapons, competing control, and open defiance was a direct threat to sovereignty. On September 6, 1970, the PFLP launched coordinated airline hijackings. Several planes were forced to land at a remote desert strip in Jordan near Zaka Dawson's Field, which the hijackers renamed Revolution Airport. And on September 12th, after moving many hostages away, the PFLP blew up 3 aircraft. Deliberately, publicly, for cameras. For King Hussein, this wasn't just terrorism. It was a blunt message. The Jordanian state was being humiliated on its own territory. On September 16th, Hussein declared martial law. The next day, the Jordanian army moved hard into militant strongholds, especially in Amman, turning neighborhoods and camps into battle zones. This is why it's remembered as Black September. Jordan wasn't just restoring order, it was fighting to prevent a state within a state.
Tras el Septiembre Negro, Jordania se da cuenta que necesita estabilidad, y no una estabilidad pasajera, sino una estabilidad permanente. lo que la hace que todos los problemas que les va surgiendo los absorba y los trate de gestionar de la mejor manera posible, porque no quieren que el Estado se rompa.
On September the 27th, Hussein and Yasser Arafat signed a ceasefire in Cairo, brokered by Gamal Abdel Nasser. Nasser died the next day of a heart attack as the region tried to absorb what had just happened. The death toll is still debated. Politics never stopped arguing about numbers. But the outcome is clear. The monarchy reasserted control, and the relationship between Jordan, Palestinian factions, and the wider Arab world was permanently altered. The confrontation didn't truly end in 1970. The aftermath continued into 1971, when Palestinian armed forces were largely pushed out of Jordan, many moving into Lebanon. Black September proved something harsh. One country, one chain of command. After Black September, Jordan didn't celebrate. It reorganized. Because the lesson of 1970 wasn't "we won," it was "we almost didn't survive." From that point on, Jordan treated stability like a full-time operation. Not a mood, not a slogan, a system. Jordan sits in one of the toughest zip codes on earth. To the west, Israel and the Palestinian territories, an open wound that never fully closes. To the north, Syria, war, displacement, and shifting borders. To the east, Iraq, decades of upheaval. And to the northwest, Lebanon, fragile, often shaken by crises. Jordan didn't avoid these shocks, it absorbed them. One reason Jordan's stability looks almost unreal is this. It has absorbed crisis after crisis, not just on the borders, but inside everyday life.
Es un país que ha gozado de estabilidad, aunque sus vecinos no lo han tenido. Sus vecinos han tenido constantes problemas de guerra civil, golpes de Estado militares, crisis de refugiados. Los principales problemas de Jordania han venido de ahí. Han tenido problemas con la acogida masiva de refugiados debido a su estabilidad. La gente de Líbano, Siria, Irak, Palestina y todos estos países que han mostrado problemas han buscado refugio en el país. Y después también hemos encontrado problemas como la sequía debido a su terreno desértico, sus altas temperaturas y su falta de lluvias, y el paro. La falta de empleo siempre ha sido un mal endémico en el país. Estos tres problemas principales han sido los que han acusado más y han fatigado un poco el reinado de la dinastía hachemita.
Jordan hosts large refugee populations registered with the UNHRC, most notably Syrians, along with Iraqis, Yemenis, Sudanese, and others. And despite what people imagine, most refugees don't live in camps. They live in Jordan's towns and cities, sharing the same schools, hospitals, rents, and job market as everyone else. At the same time, Jordan is also central to the Palestinian story. It has the largest number of registered Palestine refugees of any UN-RU field. Put those realities together and you understand the pressure. A relatively small country staying functional while carrying population strain, services demand, and economic stress that would overwhelm many states. Taking in refugees isn't just charity. It's a decision that hits the monarchy where it matters most: stability, loyalty, and legitimacy.
The Palestinian people must participate in constructing the just peace we all want. Their great energies and vigor must find a constructive national expression and not be suppressed to the point of violent explosion. The key issue that must be addressed here is the right of self-determination. This right is endorsed and accepted by this country and by our fundamental international philosophy in this age, but is strangled by reservations when it comes to the Palestinian people.
Jordan is resource limited, especially water and jobs. When large refugee waves arrive, pressure rises on housing, schools, hospitals, and the job market. When daily life gets harder, anger tends to aim upward towards the state and ultimately the king. Jordan's system is built so the monarchy is the final center of gravity. When public frustration rises over prices, services, unemployment, the palace becomes the institution people blame and the institution expected to fix it. The Hashemite monarchy sells one core promise: we keep Jordan stable. Hosting refugees is part of that promise. Jordan looks like a functioning state while neighbors collapse. But it's also a gamble. If services fail and the cost of living spikes, that same story can flip into, why are we carrying everyone else's crises? For the monarchy, refugees are a double-edged reality. They strengthen Jordan's international position. They intensify pressure at home. And in a system where the king is the ultimate symbol of the state, every added strain eventually lands at the palace door. In 1978, the palace made a move that surprised the world. King Hussein married Lisa Halabi, an American-born architect from Washington, D.C. She became Queen Noor. To outsiders, it looked like romance across cultures. Inside Jordan and across the region, it was also something else, a signal. Jordan was a conservative monarchy in a turbulent region. Bringing an American-born queen into the Hashemite family broadcast a message. This kingdom could be traditional and still speak the language of the modern world.
Ella llega como reina consorte. Lo que más se destacó fue sus raíces árabes que ella tenía, más que las estadounidenses. En primer momento fueron las árabes. Recordar que tenía, por ejemplo, que su abuelo era de Alepo, Siria, y claro, el manejo del discurso que ella tiene hasta hoy en día, de resaltar que Jordania es su hogar. Hacer un recuento de toda su carrera diplomática, nos damos cuenta de que su ascendencia tuvo una eficacia como figura de poder blanco, no por su ascendencia, sino por el contexto en el que creció. Mucho que desde antes de entrar en la monarquía ya tenía un contexto, cómo se manejaban las relaciones, en este caso de Estados Unidos con Jordania, y claro, también ayuda de que ella era o es una ciudadana de mundo, ¿no? Que estaba al tanto de la globalización, de cómo se manejaban las relaciones diplomáticas en ese momento.
Queen Noor's influence wasn't built through laws or battalions. It was built through presence, education, development, social programs, and international advocacy. That's soft power, getting results without forcing anyone to salute. She became closely associated with Jordan's development and humanitarian efforts, including work linked to major national foundations and initiatives. And she became a bridge between palace and public, Jordan and the world.
Su posición más importante fue demostrar que Jordania estaba al mismo nivel que otras ponencias europeas, al hablar de los mismos temas sobre el medio ambiente, el desarme nuclear, la educación, etcétera, ¿no? Como que sus iniciativas posicionaron como que Jordania estaba actualizada, hablaba de los mismos temas que se estaban hablando en varias cumbres internacionales, etcétera. Jordania es de los países que recibe o tiene una gran cantidad de población palestina, ¿no? Entonces creo que eso ahí se puede ver justamente su poder hablando al cómo se relacionan con la población, su posicionamiento sobre el conflicto entre Palestina e Israel y todos los proyectos que hay inmersos ahí.
Jordan's monarchy has always played defense against chaos. Queen Noor helped it play a different game, humanize the kingdom, broaden its appeal, and keep Jordan visible in global spaces where visibility turns into support. She could speak to international media in a way that felt natural. She could sell Jordan's story without it sounding like propaganda. And in an era when the Middle East was often reduced to conflict footage, that mattered. Of course, soft power isn't magic. It doesn't solve unemployment. It doesn't erase political tension. But it changes the atmosphere and it buys time. And in Jordan, time is one of the most valuable resources the monarchy ever finds.
Fue un elemento importante para humanizar al Estado, que eso tiene que ver mucho con la imagen que en este caso la monarquía da a sus ciudadanos y al mundo, que es muy diferente a los problemas estructurales que son más propios de su administración, su organización y su política interna. Pero sin duda ella sí fue un parteaguas porque se consolidó como una extranjera que se metía o que ingresaba a una monarquía tradicional del Medio Oriente.
By the end of the 1990s, Jordan's story was about to shift again. Hussein's long reign was nearing its close, and the next king would inherit a different battlefield. Because the next era wouldn't be defined mainly by coups and tanks. It would be defined by economics, public pressure, and a world where every crisis is filmed, posted, and judged in real time. On June 10th, 1993, Prince Abdullah and Rania married at the Zahrain Palace in Amman. Rania wore a custom gold-embroidered gown by British designer Bruce Oldfield with a matching silk hairpiece and veil. Abdullah wore his military uniform. And one small detail made international headlines. She skipped the tiara, choosing a look that quietly nodded to her non-royal Palestinian roots. After the ceremony, they rode through Amman in a vintage 1961 Lincoln convertible, a public moment that felt celebratory, but also intentional. This marriage wasn't just a personal story. It was the start of a public-facing monarchy, a royal family that would eventually have to govern in an age where image, trust, and everyday economics matter as much as diplomacy. The family started to grow, almost like the country was being invited to grow with them. Prince Hussein in 1994, Prince Iman in 1996, Princess Salma in 2000, and Prince Hashim in 2005. For a monarchy, these aren't just personal milestones. They're a quiet promise, continuity, stability, tomorrow. And then, in 1999, the crown moved and Abdullah's real legacy began. It was not a normal new reign. It was a handoff under pressure, because Jordan's stability has never been a decorative feature. From the start, Abdullah II tried to push Jordan into a future that could actually pay its own bills: investment, tourism, trade, technology, education, anything that could create jobs in a country with limited resources.
Con Abdullah II, el país deja de tener conflictos tanto internos como externos. Él se centra en la economía, en la educación, en la inversión, crea un reinado moderno, estable y que perdura hasta la actualidad. Con Abdullah II cambia el panorama. Ya no son guerras, ya no son golpes militares, ya no son problemas externos e internos. La legitimidad se mide en inversión, educación, seguridad, una buena administración. Su reinado se basa en la frase: para que te crean, tienes que trabajar.
In 2001, Jordan launched the Aqaba Special Economic Zone, a flagship development project tied directly to the king's vision of turning Aqaba into a serious business and tourism hub. This was the idea: create pockets of growth strong enough to pull the rest of the economy forward. And the monarchy's tone changed with him. Less distant, more visible. A royal family that understood the new rule of modern politics. If the king's role is often to steady the country at the top, Queen Rania's role has helped pull the monarchy closer to the ground, closer to schools, families, and opportunity. She chairs the Jordan River Foundation, an organisation established in 1995 focused on child safety and community empowerment. In a monarchy, that kind of work isn't a side project. It's part of legitimacy, because people don't only judge a crown by tradition, they judge it by outcomes. And in 2013, she founded the Queen Rania Foundation for Education and Development, framing education as the country's long game, because no nation can outgrow its classrooms. And then there's another kind of soft power, one people notice before they even realize it matters: image. Queen Rania is widely treated as a global style figure, covered by major fashion outlets not just for what she wears, but for what it signals. Modern, Arab, international, intentional.
Las redes sociales transforman el funcionamiento de cómo se manejan estas figuras de monarquía con la sociedad, con sus propios ciudadanos e incluso con su posicionamiento en el mundo. Primero por la inmediatez y la rapidez con la que estas funcionan, con las formas de interacción. Y bueno, en el caso de la reina Rania, pues se puede considerar las redes sociales como tierras movedizas, considerando de que ahí la persona que ve las publicaciones puede responder, puede comentar de manera inmediata, puede replicar la publicación, y también un poco porque ellos en todo momento tienen que mostrarse vigentes, ¿no? Como se menciona de que tienen que estar trabajando, entonces para ello, para justificar su trabajo y lo que están haciendo, ellos constantemente tienen que estar publicando, demostrando que están trabajando, pero también de que pueden sumarse pues, a modas, trends y mostrar diferentes perspectivas de su personaje. En este caso, las redes sociales funcionan como un arma de doble filo, de la que en este caso figuras como la reina Rania no se puede desligar. Entonces, han aprendido a usarlas de manera estratégica, cuidada y muy profesional. En este caso, la moda tiene un poder simbólico y comunicativo. Para ello, pues obviamente ellos tienen un equipo de expertos que les ayudan a escoger su vestimenta adecuada y acorde a sus compromisos reales y el contexto en el que están. En este caso, sí no se considera como vanidad, especialmente, por ejemplo, cuando vistes para dar una declaración importante, ni siquiera cuando vas a visitar a una escuela o cuando es necesario estar en un evento en donde hay que resaltar elementos culturales de tu nación. Entonces hay que considerar en este caso, la moda como una herramienta para crear congruencia con tu personaje, el mensaje que estás transmitiendo, la imagen que proyectas, tu conformación de líder o monarca e incluso la cercanía con tus ciudadanos.
In a modern monarchy, style isn't vanity, it's communication. It says without words, this institution isn't stuck in the past, it belongs in the present.
Sí, porque el mensaje que estás dando de el poder blando con iniciativas de, no sé, de mejorar la educación, el medio ambiente, etcétera, si no coinciden con lo que se está mostrando en otros lados, crean una situación de incongruencia, ¿no? Una situación en donde se ve que en este caso los monarcas no están trabajando, ¿no? Entonces puede ser contraproducente de acuerdo al contexto, si hay incongruencia o si se descubre que hay falsedad.
So Aqaba is one piece of the story, an economic bet. But the broader shift is this. Under Abdullah II, the monarchy didn't try to be less visible. It tried to be visible for reasons that feel useful. And that matters, because when economics becomes the main battlefield, the crown is judged less by ceremony and more by whether people believe tomorrow will be better than today. In Jordan, tomorrow is not an abstract idea. It has names, it has faces, and the monarchy has made sure the public can see them. On July 2, 2009, a royal decree named Prince Hussein as Crown Prince. It was a simple announcement with a strategic purpose: remove uncertainty, show continuity early, keep the future calm. And the Crown Prince isn't the only face of the next generation. Princess Aman has kept a low public profile, but she appears in the monarchy's future-facing lane, showing up in cultural and community spaces, including visits focused on Jordan's creative and design scene. Princess Salma represents a different kind of symbolism. In January 2020, King Abdullah presented her with her wings after completing pilot training, an image that landed far beyond the palace, modern, disciplined, and public service in uniform. And Prince Hashim, still growing into his role, is seen regularly at national ceremonies, part of the monarchy's quiet message that continuity isn't a slogan, it's a structure. It's subtle but deliberate. A monarchy built not around one spotlight, but around a visible, steady institution. The following years, Jordan saw protests, part of a regional wave, yes, but driven by local pressures, jobs, prices, corruption, dignity. In the social media era, public frustration doesn't stay private for long. The monarchy's response followed a familiar Jordanian logic: absorb the pressure, adjust the government, promise reforms, keep the country stable while showing that the system can move. Not perfect, not instant, but aimed at one priority: prevent tension from becoming rupture. For the Crown Prince, the focus became youth, because that's where the pressure sits. In 2015, the Crown Prince Foundation was established to support young Jordanians through leadership, employability, and entrepreneurship programs. And internationally, he began representing Jordan's message in a very modern way: that youth opportunity is not charity, it's how countries avoid instability. By 2017, Jordan wasn't just reacting to the region, it was hosting global conversations, projecting the image of a country that stays open, functional, and plugged into the world. And this is where the monarchy's message stays carefully balanced. Yes, Jordan carries heavy pressure, but Jordan also produces capability, talent, education, initiative, if opportunity is real. Then, in 2018, pressure returned to the streets, sparked by rising living costs and a proposed income tax bill. This wasn't ideology, this was household math. The monarchy responded quickly, accepting the Prime Minister's resignation and shifting course to calm the moment. It didn't solve the economy overnight, but it reinforced a core feature of Jordan's system. When pressure spikes, the state adjusts before the country fractures. Jordan was already under economic pressure when Gaza ignited in late 2023, and suddenly the kingdom was managing a crisis that was emotional, political, and regional at the same time. The street reacted fast. Protests demanded a ceasefire and strong action. The palace leaned into diplomacy. The IISS reported that between October 2023 and March 2024, King Abdullah made at least 16 foreign trips to push de-escalation and humanitarian access. And Jordan acted publicly. The king joined a humanitarian airdrop in February 2024, and Jordan's military later said it carried out hundreds of airdrops over time. It was the same Hashemite balancing act: solidarity, stability, and survival, while the daily economic struggle at home kept running underneath everything. By the third quarter of 2025, Jordan's official statistics reported unemployment among Jordanians at 21.4%. That's not just a statistic. It's the background noise of millions of decisions: whether to stay, whether to wait, whether to leave, and whether the future still feels real. And this is where the monarchy's modern test becomes clearest. Not only keeping Jordan stable during regional storms, but making stability feel like progress. In the mid-2020s, the Hashemite monarchy isn't selling fantasy. It's selling a function: keep Jordan working. Not as a headline, as a routine. Because in a region where the future can collapse overnight, Jordan's real achievement is quieter. Institutions that open in the morning and still open the next day. The monarchy has learned to live in public, continuity on display, service as message, and a next generation introduced early, so the country doesn't fear the unknown. And yet the most important audience isn't online. It's at home, measuring legitimacy in the only way that counts. Does life feel more possible than it did last year? That's the Hashemite challenge now. Not to survive a single crisis, but to outlast constant pressure without losing public trust. The story of the Hashemite monarchy is not one of perfection. It's a story of reinvention, an institution learning how to survive in real time. It began with loss, a dynasty pushed out of the Hijaz, forced to rebuild legitimacy on a new map. Then it became a state, young, fragile, and surrounded by storms. The Hashemites survived internal conflict, moments where the country could have split. They survived regional collapse, neighbors falling into war, revolution, and uncertainty. Through it all, their methods stayed consistent. Hold the center, adjust when necessary, and keep Jordan functioning. Jordan's progress has never looked like a sudden transformation. It has looked like something harder, continuity under constraint. A country building its own version of modern life. Limited resources, endless pressure, yet refusing to disappear. And as the world changed, the monarchy changed with it. From soft power to public service, from closed gates to public visibility, not to chase applause, but to keep trust alive. The next generation is not being introduced as a spectacle, it's being introduced as a responsibility. Trained in public, judged in public, shaped by a country that can't afford fantasy. In a region where headlines are often written in fire, Jordan's story is written in something quieter. Schools opening, hospitals working, streets holding, a state still standing. Maybe that's why the Hashemite monarchy endures. Not because it promises perfection, but because it has learned the discipline of adaptation. A monarchy can't control history, but it can choose how a country meets it. And for more than a century, from exile to nationhood, from crisis to continuity, the Hashemites have tried to do one thing above all: keep Jordan's future from becoming another casualty of the region.